Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next episode of StreamTime Sports. My name is Chris. I'm the community lead, joined as always by our CEO, Nick Meacham. So, Nick, I'm back off the red eye, fresh landed back in London at 6 a.m. from 10 days in Punta Cana. And all I have to say, Nick, is I don't know how you do it because that humidity was offensive. It smacked you in the face as soon as you stepped out. I'm still, it's not even cold here in the UK. Like, we're having a bit of a quote unquote heat wave, but just the sheer lack of humidity it's a godsend.
Yeah, that's why I guess when you stay at these fancy resorts, you're in and out of the pool all day and in and out of the beach. The problem in the Caribbean is that in the afternoons, the beach, the water is so warm, it's actually not refreshing. The pool is where you have to be. So there's a little tip for anyone coming out of the Caribbean is you have to enjoy the beaches in the morning because that's where the water is actually refreshing. Because in the afternoon, it is basically as hot and it's not remotely refreshing. This looks like you don't feel a change in your body temperature at all getting in and out. So despite the fact that I've been to a few resorts, we ultimately spend a lot more time in the pool than we do in the beach, even though the beach isn't beautiful and sandy and incredible. I'm guessing you would have had a similar experience there.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. I was always trying to find the coolest place. Thankfully, the main pool at the hotel was like 500 yards long. So instead of having multiple pools, I just had one really long pool, and there are a couple bridges because obviously it separates the hotel from the beach. I was kind of like a troll, and I just hung out under the bridges because that's where the coolest water was.
Smart, very smart. Yeah, the one of the most ones I go to lately are we do go to these sort of big family resorts where you've got about five pools, all sorts of different scales of things, and you can normally find something to do and hide away in some sort of shade. But definitely a lot of sunblock along with those drinks because you can easily forget after a couple of drinks that you need to top up on the 30 plus or the 50 plus for me sometimes. I'm finding more and more I need to put on the top of my head because I get decent amount of sunburn even these days. So I'm actually off to do one of those sort of holidays, a short one for about 4 nights next week. So a new hotel I can report on. So anyone who needs any tips has decided to come to Jamaica, give me a call. I can give you the around the grounds on what it's like. What's your biggest, just quickly, Chris, what was your biggest, I don't know if you've done many of those types of places before, but what was your biggest surprise in the experience or what you got or didn't get?
So I've done before. This was my first time ever at a kids free one. So that was just obviously a bit of a change in terms of just like levels of relaxation. So there's definitely certain areas of the pool that are a bit more active than the others. I'd say my group was one of the more active and probably something you'd be proud to hear, Nick. We were by far the most athletic and successful group. We absolutely owned the pool volleyball court and we also owned the sand volleyball court. Didn't matter the surface. Me and my group of friends are a fairly competitive bunch, but I'd like to say that we asserted ourselves quite quickly as the group to beat.
Nice. Well, the last couple of times we haven't got to the beach volleyball courts because often we've seen, given my background, my wife's background, both with a pretty strong volleyball background, we've not ventured onto the sand because the quality of play is too low and a bit unbearable. Plus, we've got kids to deal with. But we're going on this next holiday. We're going with a couple of our friends who also play volleyball, so we might do a bit like what you did and set up a team and challenge anyone and see if we can win a few free drinks at the all inclusive.
I will say the pool volleyball was much more entertaining in terms of spikes and things like that. Our sand volleyball certainly wasn't very spectacular. Much to write home about. It just so happened that everybody else was that much worse as well. I definitely felt it in my knees from some of the jumping. I took an elbow to the eyebrow as I was trying to go block someone else's spike. We weren't messing around, Nick.
Good stuff. Good to see you getting a bit of activity and earning those drinks, through the holiday. So well done, mate.
Yes, my liver now needs a holiday from all those drinks that I earned. And I think have you seen the movie Meet the Fockers?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, the quote "It's just a game, Fokker" was mentioned quite a few times for some very aggressive spikes that may or may not have hit some other people. But it is what it is, Nick.
Yeah, get caught in the crossfire. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Well, look, I appreciate you just finding the time and the energy to get off a red eye and then jump on this with me. So, for those listening, give Chris a virtual pat on the back for stepping up, and hopefully our coherency is just as high standard as it usually is.
Well, as we say at Sports Pro, between myself and George Breer, Will Tubbs, Steve McCaskill, the rest of the editorial and content team, content never sleeps, Nick. It's just a machine. That's just all we do is think about and produce content nonstop. It's just who we are. It's what we are.
It's in our veins, mate. It's in our veins. That's for sure.
So, Nick, one of the things that we're going to talk about for today is something that happened while I was away on holiday and I thought was a bit interesting, something for us to deep dive into a couple different aspects of this business. But that's Apple. And specifically, there is some recent news, but one of the things that happened while I was away was they hosted their annual worldwide development conference. And the big announcement this year, we have known that the Vision Pro was coming, but they pretty much finally gave us some more details about release dates, cost, and it's something that has a lot of people excited. We've spent quite a bit of time talking about, whichever abbreviation you want to use, VR, AR, XR, but it feels like with Apple getting involved, it's taking a serious step. I think probably some people just view VR as, I don't know, maybe a bit of a marketing ploy, or it's never quite come there. So, do you think, perhaps from what you've seen, can Apple finally be the people to unlock the world of VR?
They can be the ones to unlock VR. Is it now? Is the time now? And look, I still think it's way too early. I've yet to see something that makes me go, that is the product, the tool that will transform the way just media is consumed, let alone sports is consumed. We've talked a lot about over the years, about lean in versus lean back experiences, and I think various data points will show different things. But ultimately, I think what sports secret sauce is, its secret sauce is being the second screen experience for someone, as in like now in this modern day where the mobile is playing such a vital role in people's lives in not only the Western world, but indeed in even developing countries. People's phones never basically out of their hands. So the sport is kind of like the background entertainment that they can connect in and out of while engaging with friends, looking things on social, maybe searching for things that happen during the game, but also completely irrelevant things that are nothing to do with the sport. And that flexibility is what makes sports such an important entertainment tool, but an important background entertainment tool. It's not always, unfortunately, sorry, sports, but you're not always the number one focus point of someone who is consuming your content on a TV, on a streaming product, on a mobile, etc. And that bit is where it gets tricky, because then you start overlaying what we're talking about here with VR, and what we're talking about is a real super like hyper lean in product where you are trying to be 120% immersed into this event or experience. Let's say if we're talking through the lens of watching live sports with it, that means you've got to commit. In theory, you're committing, let's say, 2 hours to be sitting in this VR world if you want to watch a game of basketball, for example. That commitment is already, if you're just talking about lean in versus lean back, so that first screen versus second screen experience is already halving your audience at least. And then people who actually have VR headsets is still only in the single percentages in markets like the UK. I think it's higher in markets like the US, but it's still only very early stages. So overall, my point is, I think VR can in the future play a role once it becomes adopted at a mainstream level, but we've not seen still enough to really say, hey, this tool must become part of your day-to-day life, and you need to use it to consume content, sports, etc. through it. Otherwise, you are definitively missing out on something. I mean, and people talk a lot about audio controls, about hand signals and so forth, which you can see with the Vision Pro product. But my point is, I love the control just being in a remote control or in my hand with my phone and just clicking a few buttons without having to project and say things and like actually talk. I don't basically need to do anything. I can just tell my thumbs to press a button and that's it. So the notion of having to create a really immersive experience where you're moving things around screen, I don't know, that just feels like that's not really what most sports fans actually want yet. Maybe a small percentage really want an immersive experience, but I'm not seeing anything that makes me think that is what I must have as a fan of if I'm a top tier passionate fan of anything for an extended amount of time.
Well, one of the first things I can remember learning from you when we were talking OTT back before it was Sports Pro Madrid and it was the Sports Pro OTT Summit, was one of the things with OTT was there needed to be that intersection of where technology met with financial accessibility. And, the price of this at the moment is going to be $3,500. That is not accessible, I think, to pretty much just about anybody. And I think to me, that's the interesting part of this is where it seems like I said, this comes takes me back 5 years, Nick, when I started. As crazy as that sounds, starting 5 years ago, is that was one of the first things I took away from you. Is OTT was successful because it eventually got to the point it was cheap enough to produce the games, and there became a consumer behavior to do it that it all took off at that intersect. At the moment, it doesn't feel like that intersect is there yet. It still feels like, particularly at this point, a price perspective, the expense to even be able to access the technology just doesn't match up yet in my eyes.
Yeah, completely. I wonder why the price point is so high because inevitably they must know that they are pricing out the majority, by far the majority of the consumer marketplace by doing so. I wonder if it's because they're targeting just a really specific subset of hardcore tech diehards that basically will buy anything because they love to engage with technology and experience everything you possibly can with technology. And because the product isn't where they wanted to get yet to a point where we think it's going to have interest at a mass level yet. So just focus on getting every dollar out of all those diehards that will buy anything you create. And for everyone else, that can wait till we've got the product at a point where we think, right, this is actually something that's going to provide value to a mainstream marketplace, because they ultimately have to see a fundamental shift in consumerism around this type of technology that isn't there yet. We're not still not seeing with Vision Pro. What's cool about Vision Pro obviously is you can wear it in like your real life. I mean, you look like an idiot, but you can wear it around in real life. You can walk around, you can see through it, right? So it's not you have to sit down and do things. You can that concept of bringing it into the real world more so, and like it being providing an AR opportunity versus just a pure VR dynamic is really cool, but it's just so early stage. I think it's the first iteration of this type of technology that has both VR and AR effectively enabled in it. So allowing people to use it in real world or having a VR experience. But again, I think it's really targeting such a small percentage. It's like when we've talked, in some ways, it's like what we've talked about betting, right? Where people were, I still see it today. People say betting is going to be the great savior of sports and this new revenue stream and blah, blah, blah. But betting is only targeted to a percentage of fans who are gamblers, active gamblers. And then you have to win market share of those gamblers. And a new product is not going, you're not going to push bettors into a new product unless you've got something discernible different to have. And then the betting companies that are fighting for market share they only make money on the margin. They're not making money on every bet made, right? They're making money of the net margin of bets in, bets out, bets won, bets lost. And that again is an example. It's actually only marginal gain to the industry to generate all this new income out of a new sector. And I think it's the same with VR and AR. I think we're still have not yet seen a product that is going to ever be consumed at a mainstream level, especially if you've got to wear it. If you don't have to wear it somehow, then I think we're talking. But until then, I think we're always going to have a bit of a struggle.
So we're maybe not as optimistic perhaps as Apple is at the moment, but there's a reason they're the biggest company in the world. Let's say it is successful. Let's say it takes off the way they envision it taking off. What do you think that means for the sports world specifically? How impactful that is to sports media? And for me, what I think is interesting, I'm sure you'll touch on this. I can remember doing a presentation on Web3 in Singapore. I think maybe it's 2 years ago. Nick, did you ever hear the story about how I got nicknamed the Jurgen Booster?
Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
So
You can tell. Please tell the story.
so we were doing our event out in Singapore, and I was doing a Web3 jargon buster, just to kind of explain what NFTs, Bitcoin, all these sorts of things mean. And someone was looking for the session, and English not being their first language, they didn't understand the terminology for jargon buster, and they thought my name was Jurgen Booster. So funny story there.
And
And
you're still
still,
called that in many instances in the office today, which whenever I remember it, I like to bring it up because it is a classic. Where's Jurgen Buster now? Where can we find that guy?
yeah, well, we won't get into the story, but it's better than Will Tubbs' nickname, so I'll stick with the Jurgen Booster. But one of the things that I mentioned in that conversation where I thought Web3 could open up sports world is potentially a new set of rights. We've seen the NFL splice up their rights in every imaginable way, from free to air to streaming, Amazon, Netflix, and all that. Let's say it's really successful, Vision Pro. How impactful could it be for sports? Does it now give sports properties a way to divide their rights up even further? How impactful could it be if Apple is right on this bet?
Mm. That's a really good question. We love hypothetical. Let's play. Let's play here. Let's play some hypothetical games here in hypothetical situations. I would say that my point before about where sports has fallen into in being the second screen experience for someone who's relaxing and chilling out. So let's play the model here is like I sit on my couch and I want to chill out after a long day. I might chuck some sport on in the background. I'm probably going to be on my phone at the same time, on social media, maybe messaging friends, maybe just searching up some random stuff, maybe checking my fantasy sports team, maybe checking my emails, blah, 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 right? That's the type of blueprint I see is probably more ingrained into society than I think most sports wants to appreciate. Now, if it's successful, what that means is that sports has now taken back center stage in consumption. So, what I mean by that is it becomes more and more people will be leaning into the experience, becoming completely immersed. So, those X amount of minutes of someone watching an NBA game, a PGA Tour match, whatever I think there's MLB's also got an app currently. They are going to be so hyper engaged into the event every single moment of the experience that you'll be talking about a whole new generation of fans that are really obsessed into every moment of the sport. That's really cool. So that's a really great layer of it. I think for it to get successful, maybe again, I mentioned betting before. There's a betting component. I think about being immersed in that experience and just having been able to put your next bet on the next pitch, or the next serve in tennis, and that's all into that one experience. You can create all these different layers of dimension, maybe the live fantasy results if it's whatever's going on. You can do multi-view and all those things manifesting into it becomes truly interactive and interactive to a point where people want it at scale. Then I do think the layer of fandom or this level of fandom will be really significant for sports to be engaging with. They'll be able to drive more revenue. You can see advertising becoming part of that immersive experience because you're going to be constantly in someone's front and center into their eye line. I just think that's what it will bring. It'll bring more monetization opportunities. It'll mean those fans that are using it are way more engaged than anything we've seen in decades because they won't be focusing on their phone or other stuff. They'll be focusing just on the event. And so it'll be a really positive for sports. Whether it happens or not, that's a whole different ballgame. But I think that sort of immersion must be categorized as the highest immersion you can have outside of being in a live stadium. And even actually, I would say in a live stadium experience, the problem in live stadium is you might not always be watching sometimes, depending on how much of a fan. You have to be typically a top tier fan of the team you're watching to be in a stadium experience and have that same level of immersion. Because if you're going to just watch a game with not your favorite team, maybe a sport you don't love, the risk is you might, chat to your friends for a bit. You might not really pay a lot of attention and not be as immersed depending on the atmosphere. Obviously, if it's a big match and there's a huge moment that happens, then that emotional feeling that you'll get and the sensation you'll get from being in Madison Square Garden when the Knicks hit a 3 to win the game, you can't beat that, right? But I just think it'd be hugely significant if they can pull it off to reach that level of connectivity with a big enough fan base. Sports will be very excited if they can.
Yeah, it's just you're trying to. I say you speaking about myself. You try to be not so subjective and take it all in, and you just look at your own case anecdotally. But I'm with you. I would struggle to see a world where I would sit down and put on one of those headsets just with my current behavior, and I imagine it's probably more accurate. And you discussed, they do currently have some apps with the NBA, Major League Baseball, and PGA Tour, and for the most part, it's really more augmented reality than anything else. There's a lot of ball tracking and layered data and things like that. And I'm not even sure if the headset's necessarily the best way to do this. The PGA Tour's already got a very successful app that you can use on your mobile device or on an iPad. Kenny Gersh talked about the Web3 ballpark that they build. I think with some of the ways it's currently being utilized, I'm not even sure if it's the best case for how to even demonstrate some of that information at the moment. And like I said, you try to remove yourself from the equation because you'd like to think Apple's done more than just get two people's opinions like ours. But I'm just not sure it's the best way to present the information that currently is even available.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I do. So I remember when I talked to Anthony Arena from Aura, approach is something I'm really excited by if they can deliver it in the way they've talked about, is a complete connectivity between the smart TV experience and your mobile phone. So you are really controlling what's happening on your screen from your mobile device. And I think that's an immersion, a level of immersion I think is super valuable. Because at the moment, more often than not, it's mainly you're doing a different thing on your mobile. You might be in and out of, say, let's say you're watching Formula One, you might be in and out of the Formula One app, but you're not completely controlling your experience on what's the screen from your phone. And I think what Aura's trying to do on that front is quite a cool prospect to really sync those up as an immersion. So then you can dictate what you want on the screen. You want to see some stats on who's fastest around the track, blah, blah, blah. That's a really cool concept. What I think could be a cool case study or scenario that I think might have some legs or some interest if they can make it work is, and I think you would like this, Chris. So bear with me, but put yourself put yourself into the shoes of a is it Scott Hansen, the Red
You're
Zone
talking
guy?
about Red Zone. Yep.
Yeah. So think about, basically you could have this headset on, you could have multi-view, all the games, was it the 4:15 kickoff games on, or the 1:30 kickoff games in Eastern time in the US, have those games running on all the screens. You basically become producer. You're like, oh, looks like they're in the red zone now. Let's just, you can jump straight over there. You dictate what games you want to watch and pay attention to, and you basically control that experience. I think that would be pretty cool. Now, it doesn't need to be a Vision Pro headset, or can you, again, will be someone who can create that without the headset on, perhaps. But let's say that's something that's driven through the Apple ecosystem and product. That could be a really cool thing, to be a lot of fun for a good hour or so. Have a break, maybe a break or two at halftime and whatever, but bouncing around from game to game, and you just dictate, control. Maybe some stats pop up, or maybe if it goes into the red zone, if you're in this multi-view, the screen lights up there, or a particular view lights up because they're now officially in the red zone, and you jump over to that and watch it a bit closer and listen to the audio of that or something. Like, I think that could be cool for those types of dynamics. I know MLS has gone to that single kickoff time slot, so maybe they could try something like that, which would be quite a cool experience. Obviously, the Premier League has synchronized kickoffs at 3 p.m. You could try it there. So that might be something. But again, we're not talking about the whole mainstream. We're talking about a small percentage of audience, and that's ultimately the key point here, right?
Well, let's move from the tech side to Apple's, I guess, media side and what they're doing from a rights acquisition. We've talked quite extensively about their MLS deal and what that could or could not be, and some of the unique aspects of that being a globally exclusive deal. They've done some testing with Major League Baseball and their Friday night baseball schedule, and then there's all different kinds of rumors of all the different things that there have been linked with it, whether that's just to drum up competition that's not really there. Who knows? After all the years we said Netflix was never going to do it and they did it, who knows? But I guess the question for me to you, Nick, is does Apple even need sports? We talk about a business where so many people own iPhones. Do they even like, and I guess you make similar conversation about Amazon, but why does Apple even need sports?
That is a great question. I think they've been very good at testing the water and trialing things to see what they are trying to do. I think the Apple TV product needed sports because they needed to drive. If they're spending so much money in creating a platform like this, we've seen basically every broadcaster platform in the world decide, you know what, we do need sports after all. Hello, Netflix is the main example here. So if Netflix needs sports, even though they've got such a mature peak of audiences in all those key markets, if they need to decide that they need to start moving into the sports game, then I do think basically everyone can see value for it. But Apple as a business on its own, I don't think needs sports. They just need to provide the tools in the same way we talk about the other big tech companies like your Amazons, your Googles, etc., to say, hey, we're going to provide a platform for you to get most value out of the ecosystem and connect with these audiences. And that's a win-win for everyone versus say, are we going to spend any money? Do we need more live sports on our product? Well, actually, a lot of Apple's carriage deals, and they're doing more and more of these types of relationships, will have sports available. And so why start to compete with loss leading rights content to do so? So I don't think they need it to that extent. This MLS case study, I mean, it's obviously a 10-year runway. Really, we're going to know if it was a good decision or a good approach by the end of Messi's deal, which is not. He said that this is his last contract, or probably his last league that he's going to be involved with. if that doesn't work, then I can't see why they would be pulling out any other stops other than the example I've heard, or the suggestion that I've heard is, would they buy an ESPN? They could definitely have the money to do it. If they really wanted to double down in sports, just bring that network into the Apple TV Plus channel, and that would be basically job done. You don't have to worry about anything else anymore, or at least do some sort of significant carriage partnership with them. So, does Apple need sports? No, they don't need Apple. Apple does not need sports in non-US markets. I think that's where it gets interesting. Places like where I live now, Apple doesn't have a store out here. You can't really buy them out here. It's Android everywhere. So in those markets, what's their approach? Do they want to have more of a footprint in developing countries and try to grow their base there? Or do they just want to let Android do its thing in those markets and it's focus on the big cash cows of the main Western markets? But I can't see why they need to spend a lot of money. But I said that about Netflix, and I got proved very, very wrong in about 6 months after I said that. So we'll see.
So we'll put on a little, again, crystal ball gazing. There are some talks. The NBA's obviously got a very large upcoming deal coming. Apple has been rumored to be getting some sort of a slice of a streaming package. Do you think Apple is interested in the NBA? And if it's not the NBA, do you have any, I don't know, hunch of where they might be headed? Or do you think they take an Amazon Netflix approach where they'll just selectively go after some smaller things where it's right?
Well, I just think that what we would expect from any big tech company, and indeed from Apple, is if they want to spend a lot of money on something, they want the control, they want the keys, they want extra value. In the case of the MLS deal, there is branding everywhere. Like, Apple is now synonymous with the MLS in terms of it's much more ingrained than just say being the destination for their streaming content, right? They have really invested into being fully part of the MLS experience. So I don't see them spending similar money without having more control than you would expect. Apple is very good at keeping control of their ecosystems, of their platforms, and basically dominating, controlling the entire marketplace. So I can't say they're going to, I don't fall to the pressures, I suppose, of what the other typical broadcasters have had to follow the typical and traditional playbook, and that's why we've seen a lot of other big tech companies get out of the live sports game quite heavily. So I can't. I mean, they might have another crack at it. I mean, they've always been someone who's been suggested at going in for the NBA for a while. Does a small package of rights really help them? I mean, we've said the same about Amazon. I don't know. It feels really weird with Apple, right? Like, they are this enormous behemoth. They've taken a very cautious approach with sports. Amazon did fairly similar until they went after Thursday Night Football. I just don't really get what they're trying to do with it. I think it's just as simple as they're trying to do more tests to see if they can build audiences and use sports as an acquisition tool, I guess. But it's a bit lost on me. The exciting thing for the MLS deal, prospectively, is they have an international deal, so they have complete control over those rights internationally. And if they're able to help the MLS grow outside of the US in other markets, then that gives Apple a tool to market themselves in other markets as well. And that makes some sense. But when it's a single market style deal, just don't really get it.
Yeah, I could see it being similar to the MLB Friday night deal. My understanding that has some international exclusivity to it, where it's just a select night of the week something. But I don't know. It's hard to say. But I will say that your point about Apple TV is really interesting because you're right. Apple probably doesn't need it. Apple TV might. And I don't know, Nick, if you're an Apple TV subscriber, maybe it's because they don't have as big of a subscriber base as anyone else. I think they might have some of the most underrated collection of like TV shows out there. I think their originals are very good. So yeah, if they bring people into that, they've got great content alongside of it.
I wonder, and this is absolute speculation here. I wonder that because it's Apple, right, and there's such a divisive relationship with consumers between, are you an Apple person or you're an Android person, right? There's a definitive line there. I mean, I have conversations with a variety of friends and this stuff for some time. I wonder if that has a knock-on effect to Apple TV by thinking about, if you're I'm an Android user, am I going to just subscribe to Apple TV because they've got some content I kind of want to watch when I've got so much access to other stuff? Is it enough to push me to use a platform that I actively avoid buying buying those devices because I'm staying on the Android bandwagon? I don't know. I just wonder if there's a little bit more, like, they've got to overcome more of a consumer pressure, or backlash is not the right word, but a negativity from perhaps consumers about the perception of, oh, if you sign up to Apple, you become an Apple person. So I don't want to do that. So I'm therefore not going to commit to signing up to those things. I wonder if there's a little bit of that exists in the market. I don't know. It could be not the case, but it does definitely play a little bit of a role with me. Like, why would I sign up to an Apple product that I don't want to sign up to Apple generally and buy all their stuff, which I end up probably will by the end of this year, since my phone's about to explode from being too hot, and I definitely need better connectivity on my phone. So who knows? But yeah, it's just an interesting mix, I think.
Well, I think unintentionally you just created a perfect segue because I do know one of the things Apple is in trouble with is different anti-competitive legislations, and one of them actually is, Nick, you talk about the Apple versus Android. I know Android, I believe, was suing Apple because, as you may know, if two Apple users message each other, it's blue, and if it's an Android user, the text message is green, and Android has claimed that that is some sort of illegal marketing or coercion to make people feel like Android products are not as good as Apple products. I was reading about it the other day. But one of the things that you raised, and again, breaking news in the recent days since we're going to be recording this podcast, is Apple's actually potentially facing a little bit of trouble within the EU when it comes to anti-competition. And this is something that you brought up. You know, just to give people an idea, the EU, the European Commission, had its Digital Markets Act, which went into play March of this year. And essentially, it's to just try to, they've put quote unquote, force powerful online gatekeepers to open up their businesses to competition. And essentially, Apple making it difficult for developers to make money outside of the app store that Apple runs. And they're potentially facing up to a 10% penalty of their global annual revenues, which is not a small number for Apple. So, Nick, you're the one that called out this story. Why is this something worth paying attention to?
I think it's just a great example of how Apple looks at things. They don't want to be a player in the market. They want to dominate. They want to own the relationship. They want to make sure they set the boundaries, and to such a point where they're willing to get themselves in a situation where they might give up 10% of their revenue. I'm no doubt they will not fall into that situation, but Apple have always been, since the iPhone took off, and indeed since the App Store took off, being really a bit of dictators in like what success looks like. They can determine if businesses are successful or not. I remember when we had to launch, we launched Sports Pro app for a while. We had a magazine app and we had a general app, and one of the things that I didn't know before going through that experience is that the App Store takes 30% of all revenues that comes through the App Store, just flat 30% at the time. I think it might have changed since, I think, or it might have some flex in it. But so what other people were trying to do is trying to navigate around that. So you push them to maybe a website to sign up, and then they just put their login details, and trying to make sure they're not giving away 30% of the revenue, because 30% of your revenue is a ginormous amount, right? When particularly, no matter what the scale are, 30% is significant. And so one of the things they would do is, normally with Android products, you would get basically, I think once you upload your latest version of the app to the Android store, or to say like the Google Play Store, it basically gets approved immediately. I don't know what it's like these days, but that was it the last time I looked at it. Whereas Apple, they go through a vetting process. So basically, they're probably going through to make sure you're not trying to get revenues from other channels. I know that's become a very complicated network of issues. I remember, I think it was it Riot Games? Riot Games might have had a massive. It was the guys that
Uh,
do.
I'm not sure if it's right, but I know the case you're talking about. Yes.
Yeah, so basically they were taking them to court because of this dictatorship, and they were having to pay them flat fees, and they didn't feel that was appropriate, fit for purpose. It was holding back their business, blah, 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 blah. So my point on that, sorry, I should have had more prep on that. But basically, my point here is that Apple always like to control the terms, be at the heart and soul of the transactions that are happening in the place. So owning the marketplace, not just creating a forum where transactions can happen, but taking a cut of every deal. That's really significant, right? So they have question marks around how they're managing all those types of relationships, and if people are using Apple as a key channel for them, which almost everyone would in Western markets, then you have to be prepared to give away a lot of revenue to do so as part of the mix. I remember, are you familiar with Otro, the platform Otro that launched? It was the
No,
one
not sure.
where it was like Messi, Cantona, Neymar, a few other basically major. Beckham, I think, was involved as well. Stars were signed up for the platform, and part of it was that there's some marketing. They're going to create exclusive behind the scenes content. You could subscribe to the platform for a subscription once a month, and you have access to all this exclusive behind the scenes stuff of all of this collection of stars, a real eclectic mix of stars. And the story goes, I think I can talk about now, and I don't think I think it's somewhat common knowledge in the industry, but basically they launched with a huge bang with basically getting every one of these major stars to market their content. But the problem is that the Apple, I believe this is the story. So forgive me if I'm wrong, whoever was involved, you can call me out and tell me, and I can make up for it next time around. But I believe the story goes that the Apple product did not get approved in time. So when they launched, the product wasn't actually available in the key markets, and they lost that moment. Millions and millions of dollars of marketing value out of the promotion of the platform. They lost that basically because people couldn't then go and actually subscribe to the product. So they missed a huge window. So that just shows the impact of the way Apple approaches things. They want to keep control in their hands, and that obviously can have a huge knock-on effect to anyone who's trying to launch a product in their network or ecosystem.
Well, it'll be really interesting. We'll continue to follow it, and who knows, Nick? Maybe in 4 weeks, 8 weeks time, or whenever the NBA announces their new agreement, we might have to host another podcast on Apple and eat crow a little bit and talk about why we were wrong about however large a package of NBA rights they bought.
Who knows? They could surprise us with any sort of number of moves. I have been surprised that they haven't made any big major acquisitions, like I mentioned before, the idea of ESPN or any sort of major acquisitions on the broadcast media side. So who knows? Maybe that's another move to come and could also throw another spanner in the works. But yeah, always you have got to keep watching these guys and see what they're up to, you never know what's around the corner.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone, this week, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, everyone. Now, before you go, if you liked what you heard today, be sure to rate and review and just let me know what you think on social. You can find me on most social platforms as SportsPro Nick. And please do spread the word of the podcast. There's no better way of marketing than word of mouth, whether that be in person or on social media. And if you don't like what you've heard, or you think we should be doing more or less of something, then reach out and let me know, as I'd love to hear from you. Thanks, Stream Timers. Until next time.